My name is Rebecca Turner. I'm 29 years old and for the last decade, I've been a mother to 4 kids who aren't mine. The slap came out of nowhere during what was supposed to be a peaceful Sunday dinner at my mother's house in Round Rock. Vanessa's palm connected with my cheek so hard that my head snapped to the side, and the room fell into a stunned silence. My niece Lily gasped from across the table, her fork clattering onto her plate. The sting spread across my face like wildfire, but it was nothing compared to the rage burning in my chest. "You stole from me," Vanessa hissed, her face inches from mine, her breath hot and accusatory. "That money was mine, Rebecca. Mine." I steadied myself against the dining chair, my hand instinctively moving to my burning cheek. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." The money she was talking about, $125,000 from our grandmother's estate, sat untouched in a trust account. I hadn't stolen a single cent, but Vanessa didn't care about facts. She cared about rewriting history, about painting herself as the victim after abandoning her 4 children on my doorstep 10 years ago, without so much as a backward glance. My mother Patricia stood frozen by the kitchen doorway, her hands wringing the dish towel she'd been holding. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then closed it again, her eyes darting between her 2 daughters. Classic Patricia, always watching, never intervening. I took a breath, feeling the weight of a decade's worth of sleepless nights, scraped together meals, school pickups, and doctor's appointments pressing down on my shoulders. "You want to talk about stealing," I said, my voice low but steady. "Let's talk about the 4 kids you left behind. Let's talk about how I've raised your children while you were off finding yourself in Phoenix." Vanessa's eyes flashed with something dangerous, something cornered. Her perfectly manicured hand, the one that had just struck me, trembled slightly as she pointed at me. "Don't you dare turn this around," she spat. "Those kids were fine. You wanted to play mom. I never asked you to do any of that." The lies came so easily to her, smooth as silk, polished from years of practice. But I wasn't the same 20-year-old college student she dumped her kids on anymore. I'd grown a spine, built a life, became someone who wouldn't back down from a fight, especially not one this important. 10 years ago, I was finishing up my nursing degree at the University of Texas, living in a cramped studio apartment near campus, surviving on instant ramen and the occasional shift at a campus bookstore. My sister Vanessa was 35 then, married to James Cooper, living in a nice 4-bedroom house in Pflugerville with her 4 kids. From the outside, everything looked picture perfect. Vanessa had always been the golden child, the one who did everything right in our mother's eyes. She married young, had kids, seemed to have it all figured out while I was still trying to navigate college classes and figure out what kind of nurse I wanted to be. But behind closed doors, Vanessa's perfect life was crumbling. Her marriage to James was falling apart, though none of us knew how bad it really was. She'd call me sometimes late at night, her voice slurred from wine, rambling about how trapped she felt, how she'd given up her dreams to be a mother, how she was drowning in responsibilities. I'd listen, offer support, tell her it would get better. I thought I was being a good sister. I had no idea I was watching a slow-motion car crash. The night Vanessa left is seared into my memory like a brand. It was a Tuesday in March, unseasonably cold for Austin. I'd just gotten home from a late clinical rotation at the hospital, exhausted down to my bones, when someone started pounding on my apartment door. I remember thinking it was probably my neighbor complaining about noise again, even though I'd barely been home all week. When I opened the door, Vanessa stood there with all 4 kids clustered around her like little ducklings. Lily was 4 then, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Dylan was 2, crying softly. Emma was barely 1, strapped to Vanessa's chest in a carrier. And Noah, just 3 months old, was bundled in a car seat that Vanessa thrust into my arms the moment I opened the door. "I need you to watch them," she said, her words tumbling out fast and desperate. "Just for a little while. James and I were done. I need space. I need to figure things out." I stared at her, my brain struggling to catch up with what was happening. "Vanessa, it's almost midnight," I said. "What are you talking about? Can't they stay with Mom?" She shook her head violently. "Mom will judge me. She'll make it worse. Please, Becca. You're the only one who gets it. Just a few days. Maybe a week. I'll come back for them. Promise." She was already backing away. already leaving before I could fully process what was happening. Her eyes were wild, desperate, but also determined. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a decision she'd already made. "Vanessa, wait," I called after her, but she was practically running to her car. The kids stood in my doorway, Lily looking up at me with confused eyes, Dylan's crying getting louder. "I'll call you," Vanessa shouted over her shoulder, and then she was in her car and then she was gone. The taillights disappeared down the street, and I stood there holding a 3-month-old baby in a carrier, surrounded by 3 other children who were now, apparently, my responsibility. A few days turned into a week. A week turned into a month. Vanessa's calls became sporadic, then rare, then non-existent. She'd moved to Phoenix, I eventually learned through my mother. She was staying with an old friend, working on herself, dealing with her mental health. Patricia made excuses for her constantly. "She's going through something," my mother would say, her voice tight with worry, but also with that familiar protective instinct she'd always had for Vanessa. "She needs time. Give her time." But time kept passing, and Vanessa didn't come back. James tried at first. He'd come by every other weekend, bring some money, spend time with the kids. But he was drowning too, working 2 jobs to cover the mortgage on a house he couldn't afford alone, dealing with his own breakdown from the marriage's collapse. After about 6 months, he moved to Dallas for work. His visits became less frequent. The child support checks were irregular at best. I dropped out of nursing school. There was no choice. I couldn't juggle clinical rotations and raising 4 kids, not with Noah still needing round-the-clock care and Lily starting kindergarten. My dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse dissolved like sugar in water. Instead, I got my nursing certificate and took a job at Westwood Middle School as the school nurse. The hours were better for managing the kids' schedules, and the pay, while not great, was stable. I moved out of my studio and into a 3-bedroom ranch house in Pflugerville, the same neighborhood where Vanessa had lived. It felt like some kind of cosmic joke, stepping into her life while she ran from it. The kids adapted better than I did, honestly. Lily became my little helper, mature beyond her years, always making sure her younger siblings were okay. Dylan was the sensitive one, prone to nightmares about his mom not coming back. Emma was too young to really understand what had happened, and Noah only knew me as his mom. That thought used to make me feel guilty, like I was stealing something from Vanessa. But as the years went by, as I was the one wiping noses and kissing scraped knees and showing up to parent-teacher conferences, the guilt faded. I wasn't stealing anything. I was just there. I was the one who stayed. My best friend Marcus Holland became my lifeline during those early years. We'd known each other since high school, stayed close through college. He's an accountant, practical and level-headed. Everything I needed when my life felt like it was spinning out of control. Marcus was the one who helped me figure out how to stretch my paycheck to cover 4 kids. He was the one who showed up with groceries when my bank account was running on fumes. He was the one who babysat when I had to work late or when I just needed an hour to myself to remember I was still a person underneath all the responsibility. "You're doing an incredible thing," he'd tell me, usually while we were both exhausted, sprawled on my couch after getting all 4 kids to bed. "Vanessa doesn't deserve you." I'd always brush off the compliment. "They're my nieces and nephews," I'd say. What else was I supposed to do? But Marcus would just shake his head. Most people would have called CPS. Most people would have said it wasn't their problem. "You didn't. That makes you pretty extraordinary." I never felt extraordinary. Most days I felt like I was barely keeping my head above water. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Moving from one crisis to the next, hoping I was doing right by these kids who'd been dropped into my lap. Patricia helped, but in her own conditional way. She'd have the kids over for weekends sometimes, take them to church, buy them clothes when I couldn't afford to. But she never acknowledged what Vanessa had done, never called it abandonment, never suggested that maybe her golden child had made a catastrophic mistake. Instead, she framed it as Vanessa going through a hard time. And wasn't it wonderful that I could help out? The implication was always there, hanging in the air between us. This was temporary. Vanessa would come back. Things would return to normal. Except years passed and normal never came. Vanessa would surface occasionally. A birthday card here, a Christmas present there, always mailed from Phoenix, always with some generic message and her signature. She never called to talk to the kids. She never video chatted. She never asked how they were doing in school or whether Dylan had finally gotten over his fear of the dark or if Emma had made the soccer team. She was a ghost, present enough to remind everyone she existed but absent in every way that mattered. I poured everything I had into those kids. Every paycheck, every ounce of energy, every moment of patience I could muster. Lily needed braces. Dylan wanted to play baseball. Emma discovered a love for art and needed supplies. Noah, as he grew, showed signs of ADHD and needed therapy and medication. The costs piled up, an endless mountain of expenses that my school nurse salary barely covered. I worked summer jobs. I picked up extra shifts whenever I could. Marcus helped me set up a budget, showed me how to cut costs without cutting corners on what the kids needed. I learned to shop at thrift stores, to meal prep on Sundays, to fix things myself instead of calling a repairman. I learned to function on 5 hours of sleep and to find joy in the small victories, a good report card, a successful science fair project, Noah's first full week without a behavioral incident at school. I gave up dating. I gave up hobbies. I gave up any semblance of a life that was just mine. My 20s, the decade that's supposed to be about figuring yourself out and having adventures and making mistakes, was spent packing school lunches and attending soccer games and reading bedtime stories. And I didn't regret it, not really. Those kids became my world. But there were moments, usually late at night when the house was finally quiet, when I'd feel the weight of everything I'd sacrificed. I'd think about the nursing career I never got to have, the places I never got to travel, the relationships I never got to explore. I'd think about Vanessa, living her life in Phoenix, free from responsibility, and the resentment would bloom in my chest like a poisonous flower. 3 months ago, our grandmother passed away. Grams had been the matriarch of our family, the one person who'd always been steady and present. She'd helped me financially when she could over the years, slipping me checks for the kids' birthdays, paying for Noah's therapy when I couldn't make it work. When she died, it felt like losing the last safety net I had. The reading of the will happened at a lawyer's office in downtown Austin. Patricia was there, stoic and red-eyed. I was there, exhausted from working a full day and then rushing to make it on time. And surprisingly, Vanessa was there. It was the first time I'd seen my sister in person in 10 years. She'd flown in from Phoenix, and when she walked into that office, I barely recognized her. She looked different, older obviously, but also polished in a way she never had been before. Her hair was professionally styled, her clothes expensive looking. She'd reinvented herself completely, and looking at her, at this stranger wearing my sister's face, I felt a complicated tangle of emotions I couldn't begin to untangle. The lawyer, a tired-looking man named Mr. Patterson, read through Graham's will with professional detachment. Most of her estate was modest, small bequests to various grandchildren, her house going to Patricia. But then he got to the part about the trust. Graham's had set up a substantial trust fund, $125,000, to be used for the education and welfare of Vanessa's 4 children. The trustee was me. I was responsible for managing the money, making sure it went toward the kids' needs, their college funds, their futures. It was Graham's way of making sure they were taken care of, even after she was gone. Vanessa's face went through a series of expressions when she heard that. Shock, confusion, and then anger. After the reading, she cornered me in the hallway outside the lawyer's office. "Why are you the trustee?" she demanded, her voice low but sharp. "Those are my kids. That money should be mine to manage." I stared at her, genuinely incredulous. "Your kids," I repeated. "Vanessa, you haven't seen those kids in 10 years. You abandoned them." Grams knew. Who was actually raising them, who was actually making sure they had what they needed. That's why she made me the trustee. Vanessa's jaw tightened. I didn't abandon them. I was dealing with serious issues. You don't understand what I was going through. I held up a hand, cutting her off. I don't want to hear it. Not now. Not after 10 years of silence. The trust is for the kids. That's all that matters. She looked like she wanted to argue more, but Patricia appeared, fussing over Vanessa, asking if she wanted to come back to the house if she needed anything. My sister shot me one more venomous look before letting our mother lead her away. I should have known then that it wasn't over. I should have recognized the look in her eyes. But I was too tired, too emotionally wrung out from the funeral, and the will reading and seeing Vanessa after all this time. I just wanted to go home, hug the kids, and pretend that the complications of my family didn't exist for a little while. Vanessa stayed in Austin for 3 days after the funeral, 3 days that felt like 3 years. She didn't ask to see the kids, didn't request to visit the house where they lived, didn't show even a flicker of curiosity about who they'd become in her absence. Instead, she stayed at Patricia's house in Round Rock, and according to our mother, she spent most of her time on her laptop, making phone calls and asking questions about Graham's estate. On the 4th day, she flew back to Phoenix without saying goodbye to me or the children. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from a law firm in Phoenix. The envelope was thick, official-looking, the kind that makes your stomach drop before you even open it. I stood in my kitchen, still in my scrubs from work, and pulled out the contents with shaking hands. It was a formal legal complaint. Vanessa was suing me for mismanagement of funds and theft. According to the document, she claimed I had stolen money that was rightfully hers, that I had manipulated our grandmother into changing her will, and that I had been systematically draining resources that should have gone to her children. The accusations were so outrageous, so completely divorced from reality, that I actually laughed at first. A sharp, disbelieving bark of laughter that echoed in my empty kitchen. Then the reality of what I was holding sank in, and the laughter died in my throat. She was coming after me. After 10 years of nothing, of silence, of abandonment, Vanessa had decided to rewrite history and paint me as the villain. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the papers. I read through them again, slower this time, trying to make sense of the legal language. She was claiming that I had coerced Grahams into making me the trustee. She was alleging that I had kept her children from her deliberately, that I had poisoned them against their mother. She was demanding full control of the trust fund, plus damages for emotional distress and loss of relationship with her children. The dollar amount she was seeking made me feel physically ill. She wanted the entire trust, plus another $50,000 in damages. I sank into one of my kitchen chairs, the papers scattered across the table in front of me. The kids would be home from school soon. Lily had debate team practice. Dylan needed help with his algebra homework. Emma wanted me to look at her latest sketches. Noah had a doctor's appointment tomorrow morning to adjust his medication. My life was full, constant, demanding. And now this. I called Marcus immediately. My fingers fumbled with my phone, and when he answered on the second ring, I could barely get the words out. "She's suing me," I said, my voice cracking. "Vanessa is suing me. She's saying I stole from her." There was a pause on the other end, and I could practically hear Marcus processing this information. "I'm coming over," he said finally. "Don't do anything, don't respond to anything. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He made it in 15, letting himself in with the spare key I'd given him years ago. I was still sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the legal papers like they might spontaneously combust if I looked at them hard enough. Marcus picked them up, his accountant's eyes scanning the documents with practiced efficiency. His jaw got tighter with each page he read. "This is garbage," he said finally, setting the papers down. "Complete and utter garbage. She doesn't have a case. You haven't stolen anything. You've been raising her kids with your own money for 10 years. "That's what I thought," I said, my voice small. "But Marcus, she has lawyers. Real lawyers. I'm a school nurse. How am I supposed to fight this?" He pulled out the chair next to me and sat down, his expression serious but determined. "First, you're going to breathe. Second, you're going to get your own lawyer. I know someone, a good family law attorney who won't bankrupt you. Third, we're going to document everything. Every expense you've paid for those kids, every bill, every receipt, every single thing you've done for the last 10 years. If Vanessa wants to play this game, we'll show everyone exactly who's been stealing from whom." The thought of going through 10 years of financial records was overwhelming. I'd kept some documentation, but I hadn't been meticulous about it. There were cash purchases, estimates, things I just absorbed into my regular budget without thinking twice. "How do I prove I spent money on baseball equipment 5 years ago?" I asked, feeling helpless. "How do I prove I paid for Emma's art supplies or Noah's therapy sessions when some of those receipts are long gone?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, thinking. "We start with what you have. Bank statements, credit card records, medical bills. Those all leave paper trails. Then we get statements from people who know the situation. Your coworkers, the kids' teachers, your neighbors. Anyone who can testify to the fact that you've been the one raising these children, while Vanessa was nowhere to be found. We build a timeline that shows exactly what happened and when. He made it sound almost simple, but I knew it would be anything but. Still, having a plan, having someone in my corner who believed me, made the suffocating weight on my chest ease just slightly. The front door opened, and I heard the familiar chaos of the kids coming home. Lily's voice calling out that she was home, Dylan arguing with Emma about something, Noah's lighter footsteps running toward the kitchen. I quickly gathered up the legal papers and shoved them into a drawer. They didn't need to know about this. Not yet. Maybe not ever. If I could help it. Hey guys, I called out, forcing brightness into my voice. How was school? They tumbled into the kitchen. A wave of backpacks and energy and competing voices all trying to tell me about their days at once. Marcus smiled at them, asked Dylan about his baseball game last weekend, complimented Emma on the paint stain on her shirt that meant she'd been working on art. This was my life. These were my kids in every way that mattered. And I wasn't going to let Vanessa take that away, or twist it into something ugly. After dinner, after homework was checked and dishes were washed and Noah was finally settled down for bed, I sat in my bedroom with my laptop and started going through old emails and files. Marcus had left a couple hours earlier with a promise to contact his lawyer friend first thing in the morning. Now it was just me and a decade's worth of digital breadcrumbs. I found emails from Dylan's baseball coach about uniform fees. I found receipts in my email from when I purchased Lily's braces. I found medical billing statements for Noah's therapy, each one carefully paid off in installments over months because I couldn't afford to pay them all at once. I found order confirmations for school supplies, clothes, birthday presents. Each little piece of evidence was a memory. Emma's first soccer cleats. The expensive calculator Dylan needed for advanced math. The special reading program subscription I'd bought for Noah when he was struggling in second grade. Every single purchase had come out of my pocket, stretched from a paycheck that was never quite enough. I'd been doing this for so long that I'd stopped thinking about it as a sacrifice. It was just life, just what needed to be done. But seeing it all laid out, document after document, expense after expense, the full scope of what I'd taken on hit me like a wave. I'd spent everything. Not just money but time, energy, pieces of myself. I'd molded my entire existence around these 4 kids. And I'd done it without hesitation because they needed me. Because no one else was going to do it. Around midnight I found something that made me stop cold. It was an email from 3 years ago from James, the kid's father. He'd reached out asking if I'd be willing to sign some paperwork, giving him reduced child support obligations since I'd taken on primary custody. The email was apologetic, explaining that he'd remarried, had a new baby on the way, and money was tight. He'd offered to give up his parental rights entirely if that would make things easier, since he was barely seeing the kids anyway. I remembered this email. I remembered sitting in this same bedroom, late at night just like now, reading his words and feeling a complicated mix of anger and understanding. James had been drowning too. He hadn't asked for his life to fall apart any more than I had. But unlike Vanessa, he'd at least tried at first. He'd at least acknowledged his children's existence. I'd responded to his email with grace I didn't really feel, telling him I understood, that we'd work something out. We never did formalize anything legally. He sent money when he could, which wasn't often. The last check I'd gotten from him was probably 2 years ago, maybe more. For all intents and purposes, I'd been a single parent to 4 kids, with no financial support from either of their actual parents. I forwarded the email to myself in a new folder I'd created labeled Legal Case. It was evidence that James had essentially abandoned his financial responsibility. It was evidence that I'd stepped in where both parents had stepped out. The next morning I was exhausted from staying up too late digging through records, but I got the kids up and ready for school like always. Lily noticed I was off, her perceptive 14-year-old eyes studying me over her cereal. "You okay, Aunt Becca?" she asked. I forced a smile. "Just tired, sweetie. Didn't sleep great." She didn't look convinced but didn't push. Dylan was arguing with Emma about whose turn it was to sit in the front seat on the drive to school. Noah was humming to himself, building a tower out of his toast. Normal chaos. Normal life. I clung to that normalcy like a lifeline. At work, I went through the motions. Band-aids for scraped knees, ice packs for bumped heads, temperature checks for kids who felt warm. The school nurse's office at Westwood Middle School was small but familiar, my domain for the past 8 years. I knew every kid who was a frequent flyer, knew which ones were genuinely sick and which ones just needed a break from class. Around lunch, Marcus texted me. I talked to the lawyer. Her name is Jennifer Walsh. She can meet with you tomorrow evening. I'll go with you if you want. I texted back a grateful yes and tried to focus on the rest of my workday. That evening, Patricia called. Her voice was strained, careful in that way that meant she was about to say something I wouldn't like. Rebecca, honey, I think we need to talk about Vanessa. I was making dinner, phone wedged between my shoulder and ear while I stirred pasta. What about her, Mom? There was a pause. She's very upset. She feels like you've shut her out of her children's lives. She feels like Grams was unfair to her with the trust. I stopped stirring, my hand gripping the spoon tightly. Mom, Vanessa shut herself out. She left. She's been gone for 10 years. And Grams set up that trust because she knew I was the one actually taking care of the kids. Patricia sighed, that long-suffering sound she'd perfected over the years. I know you've done a lot for those children. No one's denying that. But Vanessa is their mother. She has rights. She's trying to get her life together. And she needs that money to help secure a future for them. The audacity of it, the sheer revisionist history, made anger flash hot in my chest. She has a funny way of showing she cares about their future, I said, my voice sharp. She hasn't called them once in 10 years, Mom. Not once. She doesn't know their favorite colors or what grades they're in or what they want to be when they grow up. She's a stranger to them. That's not entirely fair, Patricia said, her tone taking on a defensive edge. She's been dealing with mental health issues. She needed time to heal. 10 years, Mom. 10 years. At what point does healing become abandonment? There was a long silence on the other end. When Patricia spoke again, her voice was tight. I'm just asking you to consider her side. She's talking about taking legal action, and I think if you two could just sit down and talk this out. She's already taken legal action, I interrupted. I got served with a lawsuit, Mom. She's suing me for theft. For stealing money I never touched, while conveniently ignoring that I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars of my own money raising her children. Patricia's sharp intake of breath was audible. She's suing you? Rebecca, that can't be right. There must be some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. I have the legal documents. She's claiming I stole from her, that I manipulated Grams, that I kept her kids from her. It's all lies and you know it. I could hear Patricia struggling, torn between her two daughters. Honey, I don't know what to say. Maybe she's just scared. Maybe if you reached out to her, explain things. I've explained things for 10 years, Mom, I said, my voice breaking slightly. I've explained them to myself every time I had to choose between paying my electric bill or buying Noah his medication. I've explained them every time I missed out on having a life because I was raising someone else's children. I'm done explaining. Either you see what's happening here or you don't. But I'm not reaching out to Vanessa to make her feel better about trying to destroy me. I hung up before Patricia could respond, my hands shaking. The pasta was boiling over on the stove. I turned off the burner and just stood there for a moment, overwhelmed by the unfairness of it all. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway. Aunt Becca? Dinner almost ready? I wiped my eyes quickly and turned to her with what I hoped was a reassuring smile. Yeah, sweetheart. Just a couple more minutes. She lingered in the doorway, her expression uncertain. Was that Grandma on the phone? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Is everything okay? You seemed upset. I walked over to her and pulled her into a hug. Everything's going to be fine, I said, hoping I was telling the truth. Just some adult stuff I have to deal with. Nothing for you to worry about. She hugged me back tightly. You know we love you, right? Like all of us. We know you've done everything for us. The unexpected declaration made my throat close up with emotion. I love you guys too, I managed to say. So much. We ate dinner together like we did every night. The 5 of us crowded around the table in our small dining room. Dylan told a long, convoluted story about something that happened in gym class. Emma showed me sketches of a comic book she was creating. Noah ate more than he wore, which was an accomplishment. Lily helped me clear the table afterward, And in these small, ordinary moments, I reminded myself why I'd done all of this. These kids. This makeshift family. This life we'd built together from the wreckage Vanessa had left behind. That was worth fighting for. The next evening, Marcus picked me up and drove me to Jennifer Walsh's law office in downtown Austin. The building was modern, all glass and steel, and I felt distinctly out of place in my work scrubs and cardigan. Marcus must have sensed my nerves because he squeezed my hand briefly before we got out of the car. "You've got this," he said. "Just tell her the truth." Jennifer Walsh was in her mid-40s, with sharp eyes and an air of competence that was immediately reassuring. Her office was organized chaos, files stacked neatly on every surface, framed degrees on the wall alongside what looked like kids' artwork. She shook my hand firmly and gestured for us to sit. "So," she said, settling into her chair behind her desk. "Marcus gave me the overview, but I want to hear it from you. Start from the beginning." And so I did. I told her about the night Vanessa showed up at my apartment with 4 kids and a promise to return. I told her about dropping out of school, about the years of struggling to make ends meet, about every sacrifice and every dollar spent. I told her about Vanessa's complete absence, about James fading from the picture, about being utterly alone in raising these children. Jennifer listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally. When I got to the part about the trust fund and the lawsuit, her expression hardened. "She's claiming you stole funds that were designated for her children's welfare," Jennifer said, reviewing the legal complaint I'd brought with me. "Meanwhile, you've been the one actually providing that welfare for a decade with no financial support from her. The irony would be funny if it wasn't so malicious. Is she going to win?" I asked, the question I'd been terrified to voice. Can she actually take the trust? Can she make people believe I stole something? Jennifer leaned back in her chair, studying me. "Rebecca, I'm not going to lie to you. Family court can be unpredictable. Judges are human, and sometimes they have biases toward biological parents, especially mothers. But what you have on your side is documentation. You have a decade of proof that you've been the primary caregiver. You have the fact that the trust was set up by your grandmother specifically naming you as trustee for a reason. What we need to do is build an ironclad case that shows exactly what you've contributed and exactly what Vanessa hasn't." She opened a legal pad and started making notes. "We'll need financial records going back 10 years. Bank statements, receipts, credit card bills. We'll need statements from teachers, doctors, anyone who can testify to your role in these children's lives and Vanessa's absence. We'll need to document every contact, or lack thereof, that Vanessa has had with her children. Do the kids know she's suing you?" I shook my head. "I haven't told them. I don't know how to tell them. I don't want them to feel caught in the middle." Jennifer nodded sympathetically. "We may need to have a guardian ad litem, appointed to represent the children's interests. That's someone who will interview them, assess the situation, and make recommendations to the court about what's best for them. It's not ideal, but it protects them legally." My stomach churned at the thought of the kids being interviewed, being asked about their mother who abandoned them, potentially being forced to choose sides. "Is there any way to settle this without it going that far?" I asked. "Any way to make Vanessa back down?" Jennifer's expression was skeptical. People who file lawsuits like this usually aren't interested in backing down easily. She wants something, whether it's money or control or revenge for perceived wrongs. "But we can try. We can send a strongly worded response laying out the facts, and making it clear that we have substantial evidence to counter her claims. Sometimes that's enough to make someone reconsider." We talked for another hour, going over strategy and timeline. Jennifer's retainer was expensive, but Marcus had offered to help cover the initial costs, and I wasn't in a position to refuse. When we finally left her office, I felt both better and worse. Better because I had someone competent in my corner. Worse because the full scope of what I was facing was becoming clearer. This wasn't going to be quick or easy. This was going to be months of my life consumed by legal battles and dredging up painful history. On the drive home, Marcus was quiet, letting me process. Finally, he said, "You know this isn't your fault, right? None of this." I stared out the window at the Austin skyline passing by. I keep thinking about what I could have done differently. Maybe if I'd forced Vanessa to stay involved, if I'd been more insistent that she see the kids, if I'd been more understanding of whatever she was going through, maybe none of this would be happening. Marcus shook his head firmly. "Don't do that. Don't blame yourself for someone else's choices. Vanessa made her choices for 10 years. She chose to leave. She chose not to call. She chose not to be a mother to those kids. You made the choice to step up when no one else would. Those are not equivalent. The kids are going to find out eventually, I said, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at me. They're going to have to know their mother is doing this. How do I explain that to them? How do I tell them without making them hate her? Marcus pulled up in front of my house, the lights warm in the windows. Lily was probably helping the younger ones with homework. The scene of normalcy I'd worked so hard to create. You tell them the truth, Marcus said gently. You tell them age-appropriate versions of the truth. And you remind them that none of this is their fault, and that you're fighting for them. They already know you love them, Becca. That's not going to change no matter what happens. I nodded, gathering my bag and the folder of legal documents. Thanks for coming with me today. For everything. Always, he said, and I believed him. Inside, the house was exactly as I'd expected. Lily had made mac and cheese for dinner, and was helping Emma with her math homework at the dining table. Dylan was on the couch watching something on his tablet, and Noah was building an elaborate structure with blocks on the living room floor. They barely looked up when I came in, so accustomed to my presence that it was just part of the background of their lives. That thought hit me harder than it should have. I was their constant. I was the reliable one, the one who was always there. And now Vanessa was trying to paint me as the villain in their story. Later that night, after everyone was asleep, I couldn't sleep myself. I went through more old records, building the case Jennifer had asked for. I found an email from Lily's school from 3 years ago, asking about emergency contacts and noting that Vanessa Turner was listed, but had never responded to any communications. I found medical consent forms I'd had to get notarized because I wasn't technically the kid's legal guardian, but I was the only one making their medical decisions. I found a birthday card Dylan had made for Vanessa when he was 7, asking in careful crayon letters when she was coming home. We'd never sent it. We didn't have an address. Each piece of evidence was a small heartbreak, a reminder of what these kids had lost and what I tried to fill in for. Building my case meant reliving the hardest moments of the last decade. It meant quantifying love and sacrifice in dollars and documents. It felt wrong somehow, reducing what I'd done to line items on a spreadsheet. But if that's what it took to protect these kids from Vanessa's revisionist history, I'd do it. I'd do anything. 3 days later, I got another letter. This time it wasn't from Vanessa's lawyers. It was from her directly, handwritten on expensive stationery. The handwriting was familiar but strange, like a voice I hadn't heard in years. Rebecca, it began. I know you're angry with me and maybe you have a right to be, but you need to understand my side of things. I was drowning 10 years ago. My marriage was falling apart, I was struggling with depression, and I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of being a mother to 4 kids. I needed to save myself, and yes, that meant leaving. It meant trusting you to take care of them temporarily while I got help. But temporary turned into years, and I know I should have been more present. I know I should have done more. I'm trying to make up for that now. The trust fund that Grams left, that money could change everything for me and for the kids. I could use it to build a stable life, to create a home where they could come visit me, maybe even live with me part-time. But you're standing in the way of that. You're holding on to control because you've gotten used to playing mom. I understand that must be hard to give up, but Rebecca, they're not yours. They're mine. I carried them, I gave birth to them. I'm their mother no matter how much time has passed. I'm asking you to drop this fight. Work with me instead of against me. Let's share the trust. Split it 50-50. You can keep raising them in Austin, and I'll use my half to build something stable for them here. We can co-parent, be a team. But if you insist on shutting me out, if you keep trying to erase me from their lives, I will fight this in court and I will win. Because at the end of the day, biology matters. They're my children. Think about what's best for them. Think about how ugly this could get if you keep fighting. Think about what you really want here. Is it about the kids? Or is it about you not wanting to let go? Vanessa. I read the letter 3 times, my emotions swinging wildly between rage and disbelief. The manipulation was breathtaking. She'd managed to frame her abandonment as self-care, her absence as my control issues, and her lawsuit as doing what was best for the kids. The offer to split the trust 50-50 was particularly galling. She wanted $62,000 of money that was specifically designated for her children's welfare, money she'd done nothing to earn and had no right to touch. And she called that compromise. The part about biology mattering made me want to throw something. Biology hadn't mattered when she left them screaming on my doorstep. Biology hadn't mattered through fevers and nightmares and first days of school. Biology was just a card she was playing now because it was convenient. I showed the letter to Jennifer at our next meeting. She read it with a professional detachment I envied. "This is good for us actually," she said, setting it aside. It's evidence of her mindset. She's essentially admitting she wants access to the trust money for her own purposes, not for the children's welfare. And this veiled threat at the end, this is her showing her hand. She knows her case is weak, so she's trying to intimidate you into settling. "Are you intimidated?" she asked, looking at me directly. I thought about it honestly. Was I scared? Yes. Did I want to avoid a long, painful court battle? Absolutely. But was I willing to give Vanessa what she wanted? To reward her for a decade of absence with a payout and renewed access to kids she'd never bothered to know? No, I said firmly. I'm not giving her a cent of that trust. And I'm not letting her waltz back into these kids' lives just because she suddenly decided it's convenient. Good, Jennifer said with a slight smile. Then let's make that clear. We're going to respond to her lawsuit with a countersuit for full legal custody of the children, and a motion to have you appointed as their legal guardian. We're going offense, not defense. The week after Jennifer filed our countersuit, my phone started ringing constantly. Vanessa called from a number I didn't recognize, and when I didn't answer, she left voicemails that swung wildly between apologetic and accusatory. In one message, she'd be crying about how she just wanted to be a mother again, how she'd changed and grown and was ready to be present. In the next, she'd be threatening me, reminding me that she had rights, that no court would side with an aunt over a biological mother. I saved every single message, forwarding them to Jennifer as evidence of her instability. Patricia called too, more frequently than she had in years, always with the same plea for me to reconsider, to think about family, to not tear everyone apart over money. The irony that Vanessa was the one who'd filed the lawsuit first seemed lost on her. Marcus came over one evening with his laptop and a determined expression. "We're going to do this right," he announced, settling at my dining room table. "I've created a spreadsheet. We're going to document every expense you've had for these kids, category by category, year by year. It's going to take time, but when we're done, we'll have an undeniable record of what you've actually contributed." We worked for hours after the kids went to bed, going through bank statements and credit card records. Marcus was methodical, creating categories for everything: food, clothing, school supplies, medical expenses, extracurricular activities, housing costs allocated to the kids' rooms, utilities, transportation. Some expenses were easy to track because I'd used my debit card or written checks. Others were harder, cash purchases I could only estimate, costs that had been absorbed into my general budget without specific receipts. For the first year alone, when the kids were tiny and needed everything, Marcus calculated I'd spent close to $32,000. That was more than half my salary at the time. I stared at the number on his screen, shocked despite knowing I'd struggled financially that entire year. How did I even survive? I asked, genuinely confused about how I'd made it work. Marcus scrolled through the records, pointing things out. "You survived by not surviving well. Look at this. Your own clothing purchases that year totaled $140. You ate ramen and peanut butter for months at a time. You drove your car an extra year past when it should have been replaced. You didn't go to the dentist even though you had a tooth problem. You put their needs above everything, including your own basic welfare." Seeing it laid out so starkly was overwhelming. I'd known I'd sacrificed, but I hadn't realized the extent until it was quantified like this. We moved through the years systematically. Year 2, $28,000. Year 3, $31,000 when Dylan needed speech therapy and Emma had a health scare that required specialist visits. Year 4, $29,000. By the time we finished calculating all 10 years, the total was staggering. $287,000. That was what I'd spent out of my own pocket. Money I'd earned through long hours and summer jobs and stretching every paycheck until it screamed. That doesn't include the opportunity cost, Marcus added quietly. The nursing career you gave up would have paid significantly more than your school nurse position. If you'd finished your degree and worked as a pediatric nurse like you planned, you'd have earned probably an additional $20,000 per year minimum. Over 10 years, that's $200,000 in lost income. So really, your total sacrifice is closing in on $500,000. The number was so large it didn't feel real. $500,000. A decade of my life. My entire 20s. And Vanessa wanted to accuse me of stealing. The bitter laugh that escaped me sounded harsh even to my own ears. Jennifer had also recommended we get statements from people who could testify to my role in the kids' lives. I started reaching out, feeling awkward about asking people to formally document what they'd witnessed. But the response surprised me. Mrs. Chun, Lily's 7th grade English teacher, wrote a detailed letter about how I'd been the only parent figure who'd ever attended conferences, how I'd worked with her to support Lily through a difficult academic period, how she'd never once seen or heard from Vanessa. Coach Morrison from Dylan's baseball team provided a statement about my attendance at every game for the past 4 years, about how I'd volunteered to help with equipment and fundraising, about how Dylan had listed me as his parent on all team paperwork. Dr. Patel, Noah's pediatrician and the doctor who managed his ADHD treatment, wrote extensively about my dedication to Noah's care. He noted that in 7 years of treating Noah, I'd been the only adult who'd ever brought him to appointments, that I'd been conscientious about medication management and follow-up care, and that Noah's improvement and stability were directly attributable to having a consistent caregiver. Emma's art teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, contributed a statement about how I'd scraped together money to buy Emma quality art supplies when the school's budget couldn't provide them, about how I'd stayed after school programs to watch Emma work because she'd been so excited to show me what she was creating. Even my neighbors weighed in. The Johnsons, who lived 2 doors down, wrote about watching me manage 4 kids as a single parent for years, about how they'd never seen Vanessa visit, about how they'd helped with emergency babysitting when I had to work late and had witnessed firsthand the chaos and dedication of my daily life. Each statement felt like validation I hadn't known I needed. These people had seen me struggling, surviving, building a life for these kids. They were willing to stand up and say so officially. Jennifer compiled everything into a massive brief that she filed with the court. Financial records showing my expenditures. Bank statements proving the trust fund remained untouched except for one distribution I'd made for Lily's braces, which was documented and legitimate. Testimony from teachers, doctors, coaches, and neighbors. Phone records showing Vanessa's complete lack of contact with her children. The notarized medical consent forms I'd needed, because I wasn't their legal guardian. The email from James essentially abandoning his parental responsibilities. Even the birthday card Dylan had made that we'd never sent because we didn't have an address for his mother. It was a mountain of evidence, and looking at it all together I felt a surge of confidence. How could any judge look at this and side with Vanessa? How could anyone see this decade of absence and call her the victim? But Jennifer tempered my optimism with reality. This is strong, she told me during one of our meetings. Very strong. But Vanessa will have her own narrative. She'll talk about mental health struggles, about being shut out, about her rights as a biological parent. Family courts are unpredictable, Rebecca. We need to be prepared for anything. The court date for the preliminary hearing was set for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, the judge ordered mediation, a required attempt to settle the dispute without going to trial. I dreaded it but knew I had no choice. The mediation was scheduled at a neutral office in downtown Austin. I arrived with Jennifer, my stomach in knots. Marcus had offered to come for moral support, but Jennifer advised it was better to keep the attendees limited to principal parties and attorneys. Vanessa was already there when we arrived, sitting in the waiting area with her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman named Ms. Brennan. This was the second time I'd seen my sister in person since she'd left 10 years ago. She looked different than she had at the funeral, less polished, more tired. Her eyes when they met mine were hard, defensive. We were led into a conference room with a mediator, an older man named Mr. Garcia who explained the process in a calm, practiced voice. His job was to help us find common ground, to see if we could reach an agreement without the expense and stress of a trial. Vanessa spoke first when given the opportunity, her voice wavering with emotion that seemed calculated. "I never wanted it to come to this," she said, looking at the mediator rather than at me. "I love my children. I've always loved them. 10 years ago, I was in a very dark place. My marriage had fallen apart, and I was dealing with severe depression and anxiety. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like I was drowning. I made the incredibly difficult decision to ask my sister for help while I got treatment and got my life together. She paused, wiping at her eyes. What I thought would be a temporary arrangement became permanent because Rebecca wouldn't let me back in. Every time I tried to reach out, she'd have an excuse for why it wasn't a good time. She blocked my number. She moved without telling me her new address. She systematically cut me out of my own children's lives. And when our grandmother left money for those children, Rebecca made sure she controlled it completely. The lies were so smoothly delivered I almost doubted my own memory for a moment. I opened my mouth to respond, but Jennifer put a hand on my arm. A silent reminder to stay calm. Mr. Garcia turned to me. Rebecca, would you like to respond? I took a breath, forcing myself to speak evenly despite the anger burning in my chest. None of that is true. Vanessa didn't ask me to watch the kids for a short time while she got help. She dropped them off at my apartment after midnight and disappeared. She didn't call for weeks. When she did finally make contact, it was sporadic texts with no real information about when or if she was coming back. I never blocked her number. I never moved without providing contact information to our mother, who could have passed it along. The truth is, Vanessa chose not to be present. She chose not to call on birthdays or holidays. She chose not to ask about school or doctor's appointments or any of the thousand things that happen in children's lives. And now she's claiming I've stolen from her when the reality is I've spent 10 years and hundreds of thousands of my own dollars raising her children. Vanessa's lawyer, Ms. Brennan, jumped in. Regardless of past difficulties, my client is here now, ready to be a mother to her children. The trust fund established by their great-grandmother should be available to help facilitate that, not locked away by someone who has no biological relationship to these children. The phrase "no biological relationship" stung, even though I'd expected it. Jennifer responded immediately, her voice cool and professional. Rebecca has been the only consistent parental figure these children have known for the majority of their lives. Biology doesn't negate abandonment, nor does it entitle someone to funds specifically designated for children's welfare, when that person has contributed nothing to said welfare. We spent 2 hours going in circles. Vanessa wanted control of the trust fund and formal visitation rights. She was willing to allow me to retain primary physical custody, she said, as if she were doing me a favor, as if she had any real standing to take that custody away. In exchange for her generosity in letting me continue to raise her children, she wanted half the trust money and scheduled time with the kids every summer and on major holidays. Jennifer countered with our position. I would retain full legal guardianship. The trust would remain intact under my management for its intended purpose of the children's education and welfare. Vanessa could request supervised visitation, which the kids could choose to accept or decline given their ages, but she would have no legal rights and no access to any funds. We were at an impasse. Mr. Garcia tried to find middle ground, suggesting perhaps a smaller distribution from the trust to Vanessa with me maintaining primary control, or a gradual reintroduction of Vanessa into the kids' lives with the promise of revisiting the custody arrangement in a year. But I couldn't agree to any of it. Every compromise felt like rewarding her for abandonment, like telling the kids that disappearing for 10 years was acceptable as long as you came back eventually with a good excuse. The mediation ended with no resolution. We're going to trial, Jennifer said as we left the building. Start preparing yourself mentally. This is going to get harder before it gets better. That night I finally told the kids. I couldn't keep it from them any longer. Not with a trial looming and the possibility that they'd be questioned by court-appointed representatives. I gathered all 4 of them in the living room after dinner. Lily immediately sensed something serious was happening. Dylan stopped fidgeting. Emma put down her sketchbook. Noah at 7 just looked confused about why we were having a family meeting. I need to tell you something important, I started, my throat already tight with emotion. It's about your mom, Vanessa. The shift in the room was immediate. The kids so rarely heard me mention Vanessa that her name alone created tension. Lily's expression closed off, became guarded. Dylan's eyes went wide. Emma just stared at me, waiting. Your mom has filed a legal case, I continued carefully. She's saying that I've taken money that belongs to her, and she wants to have visits with you guys. None of what she's saying is true about the money, but there's going to be a court hearing where a judge will decide what happens. You might have to talk to some people, a lawyer who represents kids, maybe the judge. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Lily spoke first. Her voice hard in a way that broke my heart. I don't want to see her. I don't care what a judge says. She left us. She doesn't get to just come back now. Sweetie, I know you're angry, I said gently. You have every right to be. But legally, I might not be able to stop her from having some contact if that's what the court orders. Dylan's face had gone pale. Are we going to have to leave? Are we going to have to go live with her? No, I said firmly, hoping I was telling the truth. I'm fighting to make sure you all stay here with me. That's what this whole case is about. Making sure you're safe and stable. And with someone who's been taking care of you. Emma, who at 9 was old enough to understand but young enough to still hope, asked quietly, does she want us back? Does she want to be our mom again? I didn't know how to answer that honestly without crushing her. I think she's confused about what she wants, I said carefully. But what I know for sure is that I want you. All of you. You're my family, and I'm going to fight to keep us together. Noah, bless him, just crawled into my lap. I don't remember her, he said simply. You're my mom. The matter-of-fact way he said it, the absolute certainty in his voice, made tears spring to my eyes. I hugged him tightly, looking at the other 3 kids, at Lily's anger and Dylan's fear and Emma's confusion. We're going to get through this, I promised them. Whatever happens, we're going to be okay. Later, after they'd all gone to bed, Lily came to my room. She was in her pajamas, looking younger than her 14 years without her usual armor of teenage attitude. Can I ask you something? She said, hovering in the doorway. Of course, always. She came in and sat on the edge of my bed. Why did she really leave? Like, I know you've said she was struggling, but what does that actually mean? Was it us? Were we that bad? Oh honey, no, I said, pulling her close. It was never about you guys. Not even a little bit. Your mom was dealing with things inside her own head and heart that had nothing to do with how wonderful you all are. She made a choice that wasn't fair to any of you, but it was her choice, her issue. Lily was quiet for a moment. I used to make up stories about where she was, she admitted. Like maybe she was a spy and had to disappear to keep us safe. Or maybe she had amnesia and couldn't remember us. Stupid kid stuff. It's not stupid, I assured her. It's normal to want to understand, to want there to be a good reason. But sometimes people just make bad choices, and there isn't a good reason that makes it okay. Do you think she really wants us back? Or does she just want the money? Lily asked, her voice small. I thought about how to answer that honestly. I think she wants to believe she can be a mom again, I said slowly. But I also think she doesn't really understand what being a mom means anymore, if she ever did. Being a parent isn't about biology or making grand gestures when it's convenient. It's about showing up every single day. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Lily leaned against me. You've been my mom since I was 4. I don't really remember anyone else doing it. You're the one who taught me to read, who helped me with homework, who came to every school thing even when you were exhausted. She's a stranger. I don't care if she gave birth to me. That doesn't make her my mom. I held her, this brave, fierce girl who'd had to grow up too fast, who'd taken on responsibilities no child should have to carry. The weight of protecting her and her siblings from this legal battle, from Vanessa's selfishness, from the whole mess of adult failures felt crushing. But I'd carried it this far. I could carry it further. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.